The cold wind tore through Castle Black like a ghost, whispering secrets no one wanted to hear. Lord Eddard Stark stood silent on the wall, cloaked in black. The fur around his neck, thick but not thick enough to shield him from the bone-deep chill. His breath came out in slow, steady clouds, eyes scanning the distant horizon where the woods met the edge of the world. It had been months since he had escaped death at the Sept of Baelor, traded honor for survival, and taken the Black in disgrace. But disgrace was better than a grave, especially when your children still breathed. He had made the choice not for himself, but for Sansa, for Ariad, though her fate was still unknown, and for the North. The North remembers, they said. He hoped they remembered the truth. Jon had been shocked when he saw Ned step off the mule-drawn cart, shrouded in black and flanked by silent brothers of the Watch. There had been no grand reunion, only the hard stares of men who had buried too many dreams beneath the snow. Ned had not come here to be Lord Commander. He had come to vanish, to find a piece of himself that hadn't rotted with King Robert's death. But of course, nothing in the North ever stayed simple for long. Samwell Tarly had been the first to speak with him outside of Jon. "You were supposed to be dead," he said, voice trembling more from awe than fear. "They said you were beheaded." "I was," Ned had replied dryly, "just not well enough." There had been whispers since his arrival. Some men thought he was a spy sent by the Lannisters. Others believed he was a ghost. A few had begun to look at him like a symbol of resistance, of rebellion. Ned had seen that look before, in Renly, in Stannis, in Robert. It never ended well. Yet, it was not politics that had followed him north. It was darker, older things. One night, a raven had flown in from the haunted forest. No scroll, just a dead raven, frozen stiff, its eyes a deep, unnatural blue. Jon had stared at it too. Long, Ned knew that Loki had worn it himself during the rebellion after the Tower of Joy. Something was coming, and this time it wasn't just war. It was death, real death. Maester Aemon had grown quieter since Ned's arrival, his blind eyes turning to the sky as if trying to read omens in the clouds. "You smell like winter," he said once to Ned. "Not like snow, but the ending of things. That's what you brought back from King's Landing." Ned had no answer for that. He didn't dream anymore, but when he closed his eyes, he saw the Red Keep and Cersei's smirk. He saw his daughters, too, lost and scattered. But mostly he saw the wall, not the structure, but what lay beyond it. Jon had changed, too. He wasn't the boy Ned left behind. There was steel in him now, tempered by tragedy and forged in duty. He spoke less. When he did, it was with the kind of certainty that came only from someone who had stared death in the eye and didn't flinch. The Black Brothers still performed their duties, hunting, ranging, fortifying what little they had, but something was shifting. Rangers went missing more often. Wildlings spoke of dead things walking. Ghost, Jon's direwolf, never strayed from the boy's side now. Not once. One evening, as the orange sky bled into deep violet, Jon and Ned stood together at the edge of the wall. Below them, the forest looked like a sea of frozen shadows. "They're coming," Jon said quietly, voice more sure than fearful. Ned didn't ask who. He already knew. The fire crackled low in the Lord Commander's chambers as Jon Snow leaned forward, elbows resting on the old wooden table scarred by years of war and wear. Across from him sat Ned Stark, the man who had once ruled now reduced to black wool and silence. Between them, a crude map of the North was spread open, weighted by stones at the corners to keep the wind from claiming it. "They're not rumors anymore," John said, pointing to the forested region near the fist of the first men. "Our scouts saw them, white dead eyes. They don't walk like men." Ned's jaw tightened. "How many? Too many." There was a long pause as Ned reached for the mug in front of him and took a slow sip. The warmth did little to ease the weight he felt. The dead were not just walking, they were organizing. That meant something far worse than he had imagined. John looked up at him, eyes shadowed with the burden of command. "We can't hold the wall if they come all at once. We barely have enough men to guard Eastwatch. And yet," Ned said, "we must hold it. There's no one else." John clenched his fists. "The Night's Watch is dying. You see it. We have criminals, cowards, boys barely able to hold a sword. The South doesn't care. The Crown sends scraps and expects miracles." Ned leaned back. "The South never cared. But the North might. If we can get word to them, real word your brothers at Winterfell may answer." Robb John shook his head bitterly. "Robb's fighting a war against the Lannisters. He's already stretched thin. And they think you're dead. Remember, any message signed by Eddard Stark will be burned before it's read." The truth was sharp, like the chill outside the stone walls. Ned had become a shadow, a whisper. His name, now a stain of treason and false confession. He had knelt before Joffrey and lived, but at what cost? His honor had died so that his children might live. Now the dead threatened to render that sacrifice meaningless. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside, boots stomping against the snow, urgent voices. John rose first, throwing open the door. A young brother, cheeks flushed from the cold, burst in. "Lord Commander, Seer Alice's patrol just returned. They brought someone." John's brows furrowed. "Who? They say it's a girl." From beyond the wall, she asked for Ned Stark by name. Ned stiffened. His name, beyond the wall. They moved fast, exiting into the bitter wind, the sky above a canvas of angry grey clouds. The courtyard buzzed with noisemen dragging in. Horses, others clustering around a cloaked figure standing defiant despite her wounds. She was young, filthy, hair tangled and face bruised, but her eyes burned like wildfire. She looked up as Ned approached, and something flickered in her expression. Recognition, relief. "Ned Stark," she breathed. He froze, recognizing her. Now older, tougher, but unmistakable. Arya. Before he could step forward, she collapsed. John caught her before she hit the ground, gently lowering her into the snow. Her pulse was rapid but steady. As the healers rushed in, Ned knelt beside her, brushing the strands from her face. She had lived, against all odds. But if she was here, alone, bleeding, something was very, very wrong. Ned looked at John, "Get her inside," and double the guards on the wall. John didn't argue. Inside the warmth of the keep, Arya slept, restlessly. When she finally opened her eyes again, her voice came hoarse but urgent. "They're coming," she whispered. "Not just the dead. Others, worse." Ned leaned in. "Who, Arya? Who's coming?" She stared at the ceiling like she could still see the nightmare unfolding beyond the wall. Then her lips parted, and her words sent a fresh chill through him. "The others, they've got a new leader now. He's not like them. He talks, he plans, and he knows your name." The silence that followed was deafening. The dead marched, and now they had a purpose. The next morning, Castle Black woke under a sky thick with grey clouds. the kind that promised snow but carried the weight of something darker. Ned stood by Arya's bedside, watching her sleep as her chest rose and fell in uneven rhythms. Her journey had clearly been brutal scratches, a gash on her arm, skin like thin parchment. But it wasn't just her body that had changed. Something in her eyes, the way she had spoken the night before, haunted him. She stirred, then blinked her eyes open slowly. "I didn't think I'd make it," she mumbled. "I thought I was gonna die out there." "You didn't," Ned said softly. "You're home now, as much as you can be." Arya turned her head toward him, her mouth twitching into a weak smirk. "Castle Black ain't home, Father." He smiled faintly. "No, but it's what we have." She sat up slowly, wincing. "I need to tell you what I saw." Ned nodded. "Take your time." Arya inhaled deeply. "It started when I was captured by wildlings months ago. I escaped when they were attacked, not by men, by things. Tall, pale, eyes like frozen glass. They didn't kill everything, just took some, made them change." Her hands trembled. "But then I saw him, a man, or what used to be one. He rode with the others but wasn't one of them. He didn't glow blue like them, didn't stumble like the whites. He had armor like shadows and a crown of ice. He spoke the old tongue, but I heard your name in the middle of it. Eddard Stark." Ned's chest tightened. "What did he say?" He said, "The wolf who kneels lives, the wolf who fights dies, but the wolf who leads burns." Then he laughed. "He knew who I was. Told me to come south. Said you'd be waiting." Ned's heart thudded. A cold that had nothing to do with the wall spread through him. This wasn't just about the dead. Someone or something was pulling the strings. The others had never spoken before. Now they had a commander, one with a message. He stood, pacing the room. "We can't face them alone, not with the Watch in this state. We need the North." Jon entered the room quietly, overhearing the last part. "Even if we send ravens, who would believe us? They already think we're mad for warning them about whites. No one will believe there's an intelligent force leading them. They'll believe me," Ned said flatly, "if I ride south." Jon frowned. "You can't leave the wall." "I already broke every vow that mattered," Ned said. "I lived when I should have died. If that buys me time to warn the North, I'll spend it. We'll need Winterfell. We'll need Robb." Jon hesitated, then said, "And if you see Catelyn?" Ned didn't answer. Some wounds couldn't be healed with words. Arya looked between them. "I'm coming too." "No," Ned and Jon said in unison. "I'm not a little girl anymore," she snapped. "I survived things no one should. And if he knows who I am, I'm already a target. You think I'll be safer here, waiting for the dead to knock on the gates?" She had a point, and she had fire. Real, stark fire. Ned saw Lyanna in her wild and impossible to command. Jon relented first. "If she rides with you, take Ghost. He'll keep her safe." That night, as snow began to fall like ash, Ned prepared for the journey south. Jon handed him a sealed letter addressed to Robb, written in his own hand. "If you don't make it, someone has to know." Ned took it silently. At dawn, the gates creaked open. Ned rode out with Arya at his side, both cloaked in black ghost, trailing them like a silent shadow. The wind howled around them, as if trying to push them back. Far beyond the wall, in the deepest part of the haunted forest, blue eyes flickered open. A man not dead, not alive, watched the snow drift down from the sky. His armor shifted like living ice. His breath misted the air as he whispered, "Let the wolf come. Let him see what honor truly costs." The snow grew thicker the further south they rode, swallowing the path behind them in a veil of white. Ned kept his hood low, his face mostly hidden, though the cold still bit at his cheeks. Beside him, Arya rode with a quiet intensity, her gaze always scanning the trees. She no longer asked questions or cracked jokes like she once did in Winterfell. Whatever she'd seen north of the wall had hardened her. They avoided main roads, relying on Arya's memory of back trails and hunter paths. Ghost, ever silent, moved like a spirit between the trees, his red eyes glowing in the mist. At night, they made small fires only when they had to, taking shifts, sleeping so one of them was always watching. Ned felt the weight of each hour, not just the cold and fatigue, but the creeping dread that they were being followed. It started with sounds in the woods, branches breaking with no wind, the sound of feet that stopped when they stopped. Then one morning they found tracks near their camp, too light for a man, too deliberate for a beast. Arya found it first. "Someone or something is watching us," she muttered, kneeling by the snow. Ned examined the track. No shoe print, just the suggestion of weight. A depression in the snow that shouldn't be there. "We keep moving," he said, "and no more fires." They reached the outskirts of the last hearth by the third day, and what they found nearly turned Arya's stomach. The Umber stronghold was quiet, too quiet. No smoke from chimneys, no guards at the gate. Ned raised his hand, signaling her to stay back, then crept forward through the open archway. The silence was worse than screams. Inside, every man, woman, and child had been arranged in a circle, frozen corpses. Eyes wide open, mouths parted like they died mid-breath. At the center, a flayed man's sigil burned into the ground, surrounded by what looked like human bones. It wasn't the Boltons, though. This was something else, something meant to send a message. Arya stood beside him now, breathing hard. This wasn't just killing. This was display. Ned nodded grimly. "They want fear," she whispered. "They already have it." He found a horse, still alive in the stables, half-starved but usable. They left fast, not speaking until they were half a mile down the road. "They're ahead of us now," Ned said. "They've breached the north. We need to get to Robb," Arya replied. By nightfall, they found shelter in a ruined inn just outside the woods of Widow's Watch. As they sat beside the flicker of a hidden lantern, Arya finally asked what had been pressing since the journey began. "Why'd you kneel?" Ned looked at her, at Bella Sept. He exhaled slowly. "Because your sister was a child surrounded by wolves in silk. Because they promised mercy if I confessed. Because if I died that day, you and Sansa would have been hunted next. I chose to live. Not for me, for you." Arya looked down at her hands. "But they still killed everyone." Ned's jaw clenched. "That's why I'm riding south now, to make sure that choice meant something." Suddenly, ghosts growled low from the darkness. A second later, an arrow whistled through the air and struck the wall inches from Arya's head. They dove to the ground as more arrows rained down. From the trees came a group of cloaked figures, silent fast, not wights, not wildlings. These were men, and they were aiming for Ned. He rolled behind a broken beam, sword drawn. Arya moved like a shadow, blade in hand, her face cold and unreadable. She had done this before. She had killed before, Ned took down one man as he lunged, and Arya slit another's throat with terrifying precision. When the last attacker lay groaning in the snow, Ned grabbed him by the collar. "Who sent you?" The man coughed blood. "A gift for the king in the north. A reminder the dead are not your only enemy." Then he died, lips twisted in a bloody grin. Arya looked at Ned. "That wasn't about us surviving." "No," Ned muttered. "That was about slowing us down." They had no more time to waste. Every hour they lingered, the north bled. They rode again before the sun rose, heading for Winterfell. Behind them, in the woods, a raven with eyes of ice took flight. By the time they reached the outskirts of Winterfell, the wind had turned brutal, lashing at their faces with snow and ice. The great walls of the Stark stronghold rose from the white landscape like a memory pulled from a dream. Smoke drifted from the chimneys, and guards patrolled the ramparts with cautious eyes. Winterfell still stood, for now. Ned approached the main gate slowly, his hood drawn, Arya riding beside him and Ghost flanking their horses like a silent shadow. As they came into view, the guards raised their weapons, crossbows and spears aimed directly at them. "Halt," one of them shouted. "State your name." Ned pushed back his hood. The snow clung to his beard, his face thinner, harder, but unmistakable. "I am Eddard Stark of Winterfell. I need to see my son." The guards froze. One dropped his spear. Another stumbled back like he'd seen a ghost. "Lord Stark is dead," one muttered. Arya stepped forward. "He's not, and neither am I." That was all it took. Within minutes, ravens were sent, and the gates creaked open. They were escorted through the courtyard, where stable hands and soldiers stared in stunned silence. No cheers, no whispers, just the kind of fear that came when the dead walked again. Robb met them in the great hall. He looked older, wearier, his once boyish face now lined with battle scars and sleepless nights. His direwolf, Grey Wind, stood beside him, ears twitching. When he saw Ned walk through the door, he didn't move, didn't speak. "Father," he said finally, voice caught between joy and disbelief. Ned stepped forward. "Robb, you've done well. That broke the dam." Robb closed the distance and embraced him tightly, the weight of 100 burdens momentarily lifted. Then he looked past him to Arya and pulled her into his arms as well. "We thought you were dead." "You weren't wrong," Arya muttered, "but I got better." Later, in a room away from the soldiers and advisors, the three Starks sat in silence around a low fire. Ned explained everything: his survival, the Night's Watch, Arya's escape, the undead, and the thing that now led them. Robb listened without interruption. When Ned finished, he stared into the flames for a long time. "They won't believe it," he said. "The Bannermen, the Lords, they're too concerned with the Lannisters, with the Riverlands, with their petty feuds. Ghost stories won't move them." Ned nodded. "Then we don't give them ghost stories. We give them war." Robb's eyes narrowed. "Against the dead, yes. And the living who serve them." Arya leaned forward. "Someone sent men after us. Assassins. Said it was a gift to the king in the north. That wasn't just a warning. Someone wants us, did once Winterfell weakened." Robb stood, then let them come. "I'll have scouts ride to Deepwood Motte and the Dreadfort." "If the Boltons are behind this," Ned interrupted him. "This goes beyond Bolton treachery. This thing north of the wall is no mere spirit. He's strategic. He's planning." Robb didn't flinch. "Then we do the same. We'll hold Winterfell rally who we can. And if no one rides for the north, then we ride for them." There was a knock on the door. A messenger entered, face pale, hands shaking. "My lords, a raven has come from Castle Black." Ned stood instantly. "What does it say?" The messenger's voice cracked. "Eastwatch has fallen. The wall is breached." The silence that followed felt like the world itself holding its breath. Arya whispered, "It's begun." Outside, snow fell heavier, but in the distance, something darker rode with the storm. And in the shadows of the shattered wall, the one with the crown of ice smiled beneath a black sky. Winterfell became a war camp overnight. Within hours of the Raven's message, Robb had summoned every bannerman who still rode under the direwolf sigil. Ravens flew to Bear Island, to House Manderley in White Harbor, to the scattered northern clans who owed allegiance to House Stark. The words were simple. The wall has fallen. The dead march. Winterfell must stand. But not all banners answered. Some lords refused to believe. Others had already lost too much fighting Robb's war against the Lannisters, and some feared what had come through the breach. In the courtyard, blacksmiths worked through the night, reforging weapons from old iron and what little dragonglass they had left from Mester Luwin's hidden stores. It wasn't enough. Not nearly. The few obsidian blades they had were given to the best swordsmen, but most would be forced to face death with steel and fire. Ned stood above the courtyard, overlooking it all with quiet dread. He had prepared Winterfell for many things: siege, betrayal, southern politics, but not this. Not the end of the world, wrapped in snow and silence. Arya trained in the yard with Robb's men, her movements quick, sharp, lethal. She fought with a style foreign to northern eyes, something leaner, deadlier. She never said where she learned it, but Ned suspected. She didn't fight like a child anymore. She fought like someone who'd had to kill to stay alive. At dusk, a scout arrived from the Neck, breathless and soaked with sweat. He collapsed before he could even dismount. When they brought him to Robb and Ned, his message was gasped in broken words. They're not just marching, they're splitting. Some are heading west, some south. Not one army. 3. Robb's face paled. They want to surround us. They already are, the scout replied. That night, as the winds howled around Winterfell's towers, Ned gathered his family in the Godswood. The heart tree stood tall and still, its red leaves heavy with frost, the face carved into the trunk watching like an ancient god waiting for blood. "We may not survive this," Ned said quietly, "but we can choose how we face it, with swords in hand, not on our knees." Arya knelt before the tree, her head bowed. "We fight." Robb nodded beside her. "We lead." Ned looked to the sky. "Then the old gods must watch over us, because no one else will." The next morning, the sun didn't rise. A thick, grey cloud blanketed the sky, and the cold was sharper, unnatural. The kind of cold that made breath freeze in the air and your bones ache from the inside. A different kind of frost. Riders returned with more dire news. Small villages razed to the ground, their inhabitants turned or vanished. The dead no longer attacked to conquer. They moved to erase. The very land seemed to rot in their wake. And then the first signs appeared outside Winterfell's walls. A lone horse, riderless, staggered toward the gates at dusk. Its skin was torn in places, revealing black muscle and frozen bone. From its saddle hung a banner what remained of the Black of the Night's Watch, scorched and shredded. Tied to the saddle horn was a human hand, frozen stiff, clutching a scroll. Jon's handwriting. Ned read it aloud in the war room as Robb, Arya, and the rest of the council listened. They took Eastwatch in hours. We held them back with fire, but it was not enough. We fall back to Shadow Tower. Send word to Daenerys Targaryen. We need her dragons. We cannot hold the wall. The dead are too many. The one who leads them, he speaks now. He remembers. He remembers Winterfell. He remembers Stark. Ned's hand shook as he finished. Robb stared at him. He knows you. Arya said nothing, her eyes locked on the flames in the hearth. He does, Ned whispered. And now he's coming home. From the top of Winterfell's highest tower, the black shapes moved on the horizon. Slow, deliberate. The war for the North had begun. The horns sounded at dawn. 3 deep, mournful blasts, danger, death, and dread. The call that once signaled White Walkers now screamed across Winterfell's battlements, echoed by the panic of men who barely understood what they were about to face. Robb stood on the ramparts, armor strapped tight across his chest, grey wind snarling beside him, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the white storm gathered like a wall of smoke, hiding the enemy behind its silence. The snow wasn't falling, it was pouring sideways, unnatural and angry. A blizzard, yes, but alive somehow. They're close, he said without turning. I can feel it. Ned stood beside him, no longer the quiet lord of the North, but something colder, harder. The wall had changed him. His black cloak snapped in the wind, and his sword, long kept in peace, now hung at his side like an old truth. Ice was gone, but Ned Stark still knew how to kill. They want fear first, Ned said. They'll watch us break before they strike. But Winterfell would not break so easily. Arya moved through the castle's inner yards, checking on the small folk, handing blades to boys barely older than she'd been when she left King's Landing. She didn't tell them they'd survive. She just showed them how to stab a white in the head, and that seemed to be enough. Down in the crypts, Maester Loren and the remaining healers turned stone. Halls into makeshift sick bays. The dead of House Stark lay silently in their tombs, but even that brought no comfort. Not anymore. Not with the stories Arya had told about whites rising from graves. Don't let them bury anyone down here, she had warned Robb. Not unless you want your ancestors clawing out of their coffins. So the bodies of fallen scouts and defenders were burned outside the walls, black smoke trailing into the cursed sky like a warning to the gods. And then they came. Just after dusk, when the fire pits were lit and the archers waited along the walls, the dead arrived. Not in waves, not with screams or war cries, just silence. Thousands of them, eyes glowing blue in the snowstorm, moving like a single frozen tide. And at the front he rode, tall, broad, face hidden beneath a helm shaped like a crown of twisted ice. His armor shimmered, constantly changing form, like frost crawling across glass. He held no banner, he needed none. Ned stared down at him, feeling something cold curl in his chest. The others had no names, but this one, he remembers, Jon had written. And now, Ned did too. It was him, the boy from the Tower of Joy. One of the unnamed Targaryen bastards who'd disappeared in the chaos after Robert's rebellion. He had been thought dead, buried in the ashes of the rebellion. But he hadn't died. He had gone north, past the wall, and something had found him, or he had found it. Now he led the dead with purpose. Robb turned to the War Council. We strike first, light the trenches, signal the archers. We don't wait for them to climb our walls. Arya looked at Ned. You know him, don't you? Ned didn't look away from the ice-crowned rider. I once knew the man he was, before death made him something worse. Can he be killed? She asked. Ned answered with the truth. I don't know. And then the horns sounded again, one long blast. This time, the dead charged. They hit the walls like a black wave crashing against cliffs. Arrows rained down. Many useless, some landing true. The trenches lit up in lines of fire, and the night exploded in chaos. Screams tore through the air, steel clanged against bone, and snow turned red underfoot. Ned fought beside Robb on the battlements, cutting down wights as they clawed over the stone. Arya darted through shadows, leaping from rampart to roof, blade dancing like a ghost's whisper. For hours they held, but then the ice-ground rider raised his hand. The winds screamed louder, the flames dimmed, and from the east a terrible sound rose, a howl like 10,000 lost souls. Then the second wave came. Creatures that were not men, not White's things, of ice and sinew and horror. The remnants of wild beasts, stitched together by cold magic. They moved fast, fast enough to leap over the trenches. The walls would not hold them, as panic threatened. To break the defenders, Ned looked at Arya and Robb. We fall back to the keep. Burn the outer yards. If they take Winterfell, they'll bury the north under ice. Robb nodded grimly. We hold the heart. Ned turned back for one final look at the wall and saw him, the ice-crowned leader staring up at him. No words, no sound, just a single gesture, a hand across his throat. A promise. Winterfell would fall. The walls of Winterfell were aflame. The outer courtyard burned with an eerie light-orange fire against blue eyes, smoke twisting like spirits as the dead poured over the defences. The defenders retreated inch by inch, line by line, bloodied and breathless, until only the ancient stone keep stood between them and the end. Ned, Robb, and Arya stood side by side on the inner wall as the last of the soldiers fell back. The snow was black with ash now, thick as fog, choking the air and coating their cloaks. Ghost limped beside Arya, wounded but still defiant, his growl low and constant. Inside the keep, small folk crowded the halls, some crying, some praying. The crypts were sealed with iron and salt, guarded by men too old to fight above, but still loyal. Every room, every stairwell had been prepared for a last stand. Ned looked to Robb. We can't win this battle. I know, Robb said, but we can make them bleed. Arya said nothing, gripping her blade tight, face pale, an expression unreadable. Then the walls cracked. A sound like thunder split. The night as the main gate exploded inward, flung apart by an unnatural force. The dead poured through like a flood, clawing over the fallen, their screeches cutting the air. And behind them, he entered. The crowned one. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked. Each step brought silence. The whites around him slowed, almost reverent, partying as he moved forward toward the heart of Winterfell. Ned descended the stairs without a word. Where are you going? Robb called after him. Ned didn't stop to end it. Arya caught up with him halfway down the hall. You're going alone? Yes, he said. No, you're not. They reached the great hall just as the dead broke through the final doors. Ned stood in, the center, sword drawn. The ice-crowned one stepped forward, face still hidden, body towering like death made flesh. You remember me, the creature said in a voice like cracking glaciers. You were there when my blood was spilled, when your king burned my name from history. I remember the boy you were, Ned said, not the monster you became. I became what your world made me, the creature said. Exile, orphan, forgotten, Now I return, not to beg, but to claim. He raised his hand, and the fires dimmed. Arya leaped from the shadows, striking fast and low, but the creature caught her mid-air and threw her across the room like a rat. She hit the wall hard and crumpled. Ned didn't hesitate. He charged. Their swords met with a sound like steel on ice. Sparks flew. The creature fought with brutal precision, and Ned, older, slower, struggled to match him. But he was Stark, and the old blood still burned in him. He ducked under a swing and drove his blade deep into the creature's side. The ice cracked, and the thing screamed not in pain, but in rage. "You cannot kill the storm," it hissed. "Maybe not," Ned said, "but I can slow it down." From behind, Arya rose, blood on her brow. She held a blade of dragon glass now, black and jagged. She didn't scream when she struck. She didn't shout. She simply drove the dagger into the base of the creature's skull. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the crowned one froze, arms stiff. A crack ran from his neck to his crown, and he shattered like glass, collapsing into a pile of snow and bone. The wights screamed in unison and began to fall. All across Winterfell they dropped, lifeless again. The silence that followed was deafening. Ned stumbled to the floor beside Arya, both of them gasping, bleeding, alive. Robb burst into the hall moments later. "Is it over?" Ned nodded slowly. "For now." But as they looked around at the ruined great hall, at the bodies of the fallen, the blood, the smoke, the frost, they knew the North had changed forever. Winterfell still stood, but it had paid the price. And Ned Stark, the man who should have died on the steps of Bella's Sept, had finally fulfilled the cost of his survival. Not with honor, but with blood.